The train raced along the track as if it was sewing up the black night. I stared blankly out of the window, and the daylight was gradually fading away. I didn't read a book, didn't look at a tablet, and didn't listen to music. For the first time in a long while, I focused on the scenery. Leaving the familiar place made the being outside the train unfamiliar as well. The orange sunset shone through the window, and as the sun set behind the western hills, the landscape outside the window gradually succumbed to the night. I watched with great regret as the last glimmer of light disappeared into the darkness. Perhaps this was the last time I would see the daylight. I could never return to that bright world. I probably wouldn't go back to where I used to live either. The dim yellow lights inside the train gently illuminated the night, and I imagined that I might never see the morning again. I felt a sense of emptiness, but at the same time, I felt very relieved. I finally didn't have to go back, didn't have to return to my daily life, that high school, that music room where there was no place for me. At night, in the cold and empty car, I bit my lip. I had already made up my mind. There was no turning back. Let's end it all today. I couldn't even imagine going back to school tomorrow. The train stopped at an unfamiliar station. A place I had never been to. A station name I had never heard of. No one got on or off, and the lights shone neatly on the quiet platform. The air felt exceptionally fresh in this kind of night, so different from all the previous nights I had experienced. As the train prepared to depart, I heard the conductor's whistle, accompanied by the unique freshness of late summer and early autumn in the air, and my heart tightened. The train was departing. Apart from me, there was only a salaryman in a suit and a middle-aged lady with a shopping bag sitting a bit further away. They had boarded a few stations before, and it seemed they hadn't noticed me. I thought this way, feeling very embarrassed as I lowered my head. I had fantasized that someone might come and ask me why a high school student was riding the train alone at this time, even though I had already decided not to look back. I had spent all my allowance on this one-way ticket, the farthest one I could buy. Once I got on the train, I turned off my phone. My family was probably worried sick by now, unable to contact me, and they might have contacted my school teachers and classmates to find me. I fantasized about all of this and told myself that there was no turning back. The train continued to speed towards the distance, and at some point, the commuters and the lady had already gotten off, leaving only me in the car. At that moment, I looked out of the window, and the scenery outside had disappeared. The streetlights and buildings that had been flickering vanished into the night in a matter of seconds. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it, but this time, I noticed. We must have reached the seaside. The train had gone to the seaside of the neighboring county. I hadn't seen the sea at night. Although we hadn't reached the farthest station yet, this impulse made me get off the train early at a small station with only one station attended. Just as I got off the train, the salty and humid sea breeze hit my cheeks. Dim street lights flickered, and the nearby streets appeared especially quiet. In my conspicuous uniform, I hurriedly left the station with my head down and made my way through the slightly worn-out streets towards the destination, the seaside. It was early September, the transition from summer to autumn, and the season for swimming in the sea had already passed. The sea breeze had weathered the signs of the seaside shops, and most of the stores had their shutters tightly closed. In the unfamiliar town's night, only a crescent moon accompanied me, chasing me from behind. Soon, I heard the sound of the waves. Sha, sha, following the sound's guidance, I finally found the road leading to the seaside. Through a few old buildings on the side of the road, I could see the distant breakwater on the beach. Can I get even closer to the sea? I thought and continued walking. Before long, I arrived at a square with no buildings around, probably a parking lot used as a beach in the summer. The small huts on either side of the stone pillars facing the sea were labeled Sea House, but they were completely lifeless. It was probably the wrong season, and maybe the place had even closed down. Sha, accompanied by the sound of the waves, it felt like someone was calling me. I walked towards the sea, and the street lights in the distance shimmered like fish silhouettes on the surface of the water. I clutched my uniform bag with both hands and stepped into the sea. After a day of running around, a sense of reality welled up, along with a feeling of emptiness, almost like being in a dream. Maybe walking into the sea like this wouldn't be a bad idea. It might be painful, but it wouldn't matter what method I used. Perhaps coming to the seaside today was meant for this. I thought that way and absent-mindedly turned my head to the side, as if I had noticed something. Near a utility pole in the corner of the square, there was a bouquet of flowers. From there, you could clearly see the sea and the coastline. The bouquet was covered with a plastic bag, and it consisted of bluebells and baby's breath. Some of the flowers drooped forward, looking wilted. There were also milk tea cans, a plush toy, and the remnants of sparklers bags that seemed to want to leave a signature of the summer. Did someone die here? In a traffic accident or a drowning incident? I couldn't help but think of these things. When I snapped out of it, "Hey, are you alone?" "Yes, I'm alone." She was taken aback and nodded with interest, staring at my face as if lost in thought for a while. "I see," she said, nodding again. "What are you doing here?" "Well..." She stared at me without blinking, and I couldn't meet her gaze, feeling uneasy. "I came to see the sea." When I casually dismissed her question, she continued to stare at me and murmured, "I see." She was a young girl in light clothing, wearing a sleeveless dress in this early autumn weather. She seemed to be a local child, but even though she lived by the sea, there were no signs of sunburn on her skin. Her exposed arms looked a bit pale under the moonlight. "How about you? What are you doing here at this hour?" I remembered it was already past 9 when I left the station. While recalling how long it took me to get here, she turned her head and spoke. She began to explain. "I had an argument with my mom, so I came out to destroy the evidence." "What?" "I had a really messy room, and my mom told me to clean it today. She said if I couldn't clean it properly today, she wouldn't let me sleep. So I was cleaning by myself, and I found this thing." As she spoke, she pulled something out from behind her. I hadn't noticed it before, but she was carrying a rather large bag that read Sparkler Set. I bought all of these 2 years ago and completely forgot about them. But there's gunpowder inside, so I felt bad just throwing it away. If I get caught with this, my parents will probably scold me, so I thought I might as well dispose of it. That's why I came out here. "Oh?" I didn't know how to respond to her, and I thought it might be best to keep some distance since it felt a bit risky. There were no fences along the edge of the square, and the beach was just below the steps. I looked at the bouquet I had seen earlier. From this angle, it seemed to be in the shadow of a utility pole, and I couldn't see it clearly. It felt like the sparkler's bag that had been placed near the bouquet had disappeared. The bag she was holding seemed to be the same one that had been there earlier, the one with sparklers inside. "Oh? What should I do?" She said this. Suddenly, she appeared quite troubled. "I want to set off sparklers, but I forgot to bring matches or a lighter." I have one. Do you want to use it?" Hearing her words, I remembered that I had a lighter in my bag and said. The girl's expression instantly brightened up. "Wow! May I?" "Yes," I nodded, and she leaned closer to me. That's when I noticed that she was barefoot. It felt like an electric shock hit my neck. The ambient temperature hadn't changed significantly, but I suddenly felt a cold shiver down my spine. On the square by the beach, she wasn't wearing shoes. Oh, why isn't it lighting up?" She emptied all the sparklers from the bag and whined. There was a candle in the bag. She placed the candle on the concrete ground and lit it with a lighter. I didn't usually use lighters, so I had trouble lighting it at first. "Give it to me," she said to me. With a snap, the candle was lit. But the crucial sparklers just wouldn't catch fire. No matter how she moved the fire toward the sparklers' tips, there was no sign of ignition. It's probably because they got damp after all. They've been stored for so long. Her somewhat disappointed voice reached me, but my attention was still on the bag of sparklers near the utility pole. If the sparklers she was holding now were from the bag over there, it was no wonder they wouldn't light, given that they had been exposed to the elements and likely became damp. Hey. She raised her voice calmly, but my heart was pounding. I cautiously asked her, "Is the bouquet left there memorial for someone? Who is it mourning? Where is it?" "Right by that utility pole. There are lots of flowers, unicorn plush toys, and things like that." "Oh? I see." She nodded slowly. However, she didn't look in the direction of the utility pole. Instead, she took out a new sparkler and tried to light it. It seems like an accident from a few years ago. Could it be that the girl passed away? "Why are you asking this?" "I saw the dolls, milk tea cans, and so on over there, so I was thinking if it might be for a girl." "Yes?" She nodded and took out another sparkler, then looked at me. "Yeah, it seems like it was a girl." "Was the accident a drowning incident?" "Yes." The candle went out in the wind, and she still didn't look at the bouquet. She stared at me intensely and slowly said, "Yes, she drowned." I swallowed slowly, and for a moment, she would turn to a surprised expression. "Oh?" "The fire went out again," she said, reaching for the lighter and relighting the candle. I looked at her and tried to focus on her shadow. People often say that spirits don't cast shadows. But whether it was the moonlight or the dim street lights, they couldn't illuminate the ground near her feet. The uneven shadows of the buildings on both sides made it impossible to discern if there was a shadow at her feet. In the end, I couldn't even see my own shadow clearly. I sighed deeply. This is just ridiculous. Sparklers shouldn't be so hard to light up no matter what. Maybe they've all gotten damp. Should we give up? No way. Let me try them all first. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, as delicate and dreamlike as a fairy, but at the same time, it felt a bit too fragile. She took a new sparkler from her bag and handed one to me. "Do you want to play with me?" Before I could respond, I held the sparkler given by her. I mimicked her to crouch down on the ground and put the head of the sparkler toward the candle. But the sparkler still showed no sign of igniting. We faced each other with the candle in between. She began to speak. Can I ask you something?" "Yes?" "Did you run away from home?" Under the dying light of the candle, I didn't dare to look at her and instead stared at one end of the sparkler I was holding. My heart was racing with anxiety. "Why are you asking this?" "Because you are wearing a school uniform, and your uniform doesn't look like it's from around here. It seems like you left home right after school." She asked in a calm and unexpectedly serious tone. "Are you a high school student?" "Yes?" "I see. Just like me." I nodded, and then I regretted not at least saying I was a high school student. But after she said we were similar, I felt better about telling the truth. "Can I ask you something then?" "Of course. What do you want to know?" "So, are you a ghost?" My lips trembled as I uttered the word ghost, and I didn't even dare to say the ghost part out loud. She heard it and laughed, then asked me in response, "Why are you asking this?" I couldn't answer. I didn't dare to meet her pale feet. She asked again, "Why would you think that? It's so late, and you're dressed so lightly, and..." I wanted to explain clearly that ghosts don't exist, and I had never seen one. But now, maybe I really had encountered a ghost, and I was heading towards my own demise. "Hey, I'll ask you another question again." I questioned her like this, but she didn't seem shaken. She tossed aside the sparkler she had tried and picked up another one to attempt lighting it. She asked me, "Do you plan to come here to die?" A strong gust of wind blew in our faces, and as I replied, "Why do you know?" my voice was carried away by the wind. But I was sure she heard what I said. She didn't look at me. Instead, she gazed at the sparkler in her hand and continued. "Just now, I saw when you took out the lighter from your bag. The rope and the knife. The knife was wrapped in a towel, but it was definitely a knife. Right. I remained silent in response to her questioning. She went on. I guess the lighter might be used by you for suicide. You clearly don't know how to use it, but carrying it with you was very suspicious, isn't it? She said in a singing-like voice. She took her eyes off the sparkler and looked up. She locked eyes with me. If you were thinking of setting yourself on fire with the lighter, just the thought of it would be painful enough. Right. What she said was not true. I hadn't really thought about how to die, even though I had the knife and the rope. I brought them with me mainly because I wasn't sure if I had the courage. If I were really going to commit suicide, I might just jump in front of a train somewhere. No, it's not that. Finally, I spoke up. We were both holding sparklers at nearly the same height, and she continued to gaze at me. The lighter, it's just in case I change my mind and want to use it. I didn't know why I said that. Up until just now, I hadn't shared these thoughts with anyone. But for some reason, I said it in front of her. When I have regrets, I can use it to burn my farewell letter. As I said this, I realized that this was the case. The lighter was borrowed from my grandmother's shrine to light incense. I don't know why I had only noticed the knife and rope, things related to death. So, how could I have thought of a way out? I understood now. What I really wanted wasn't to sever all ties but to disappear completely. That's why I had brought the lighter. I let out a sigh of relief. That was it. Even though I had firmly resolved my beliefs, why was I suddenly questioning myself at the end? She said firmly to me, "Don't do it." Her eyes were filled with determination. It will be very painful. But, my voice trembled. I don't remember exactly when I first felt that something was wrong. By the time I realized that something was indeed wrong, everything had already changed, and I wanted to change, but it was too late. During the summer vacation of the first semester, I could still manage, but after the school reopened, every day at school felt like suffocation, and I felt like I couldn't go on. Was it you? Did you do it? I said I didn't know, that it wasn't me, but nobody was listening to me. I was ostracized in the club, constantly criticized by those guys, and everyone was growing distant from me. Gradually, I was left all alone. I don't know how this incident got to the class, but my classmates in the class also started to look at me with disdain, began mocking me. I had become the easy target, the isolated one, the one being ridiculed. I had talked to my teacher about quitting the club, but I was told by the seniors, "Are you trying to run away? Even though it was your fault, are you trying to run away? If you want to reflect, let me see your attitude. Don't think of running away." Although I had been so passionate about wind instruments, now, just looking at the instrument and listening to the music, my chest would start to ache, the condemnations of everyone echoing in my ears. My fingers, which were holding the clarinet, would tremble incessantly. That's when I realized, it wasn't me who was wrong. So, the only thing I could do was to use my death as proof. In a world without me, let them reflect. Let them think about how desperate and painful I was. Let them be criticized by everyone. My parents had no idea about my sudden departure. They must be very sad. Thinking about this made my heart ache like a knife. I'm sorry. I've thought about it many times. If my mother found out that her child was hated by so many people, she would be so heartbroken. After I die, the term bullying might come up. But I don't think I was bullied. I suddenly became hated by everyone for some unknown reason. Even if I tried to be friends with them, they would still hate me harshly. I had already made up my mind to end it today. There was no turning back. I gathered the courage to come here. This was my second time today. I don't care if I never see daylight again. I've seen enough of the being outside the car window today, and this was my first time at the beach at night, so I don't want to go back. Going back would just mean repeating the same day, tomorrow, and the day after, and the mere thought of it is very painful. Maybe you shouldn't do this. At least not today, she said to me again. Although we had just met, her gaze was so sincere. Her eyes held a seriousness I had never seen before. Something will change after today, she said. No, nothing will change, I replied. You see? You came all the way out here for the first time, didn't you? Suddenly, she raised her voice. You came all the way out here, so everything will be fine. Don't give up. But, at that moment, my throat tightened with pain, and cries echoed on the beach. The sparkler in my hand lit up. There was a hissing sound, and sparks twinkled in the darkness. The sparkler in my hand was ignited. Huh. Wow. Almost simultaneously, she and I exclaimed in surprise, completely forgetting our previous conversation. And then, wow. Wow. We shouted in excitement nearly at the same time. It's lit. The sound of the crashing waves in my ears was covered by the bursting sounds of the sparklers. I cherished this moment of brightness and sound. Soon, the bundle of light in my hand disappeared, just like the last sunset I saw today from the car. The sparkler burned out, leaving behind an afterglow that seemed to linger in the depths of my vision, its curved, drooping shape resembling reeds. It reminded me that this year, I hadn't seen any reeds. My mom and I used to use reeds to decorate during the Mid-Autumn Festival every year. It was all because of those people. My thoughts were shifting too quickly, and I lost control of my emotions in that moment. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. I crouched down, holding the burned-out sparkler, unable to move. Tears welled up from my tightly closed eyes. I don't want to die. The echoes of the sparkler still resonated in my ears. I didn't intend to tell anyone, and I was shocked by the words that had slipped out unintentionally. It wasn't sadness, anger, or pain, and I couldn't put a name to this emotion. She replied. I slowly removed my hand from my warm eyelids, and she was still there. I breathed a sigh of relief, fearing she might have vanished like she did earlier. But I'm so scared. She nodded again. It's quite scary. I'm really scared to go back. Everyone must be worried about this, and my mom is definitely concerned. I also have no money left, and I suddenly realized I had blurted out. Can you stay with me? Words I couldn't say to a regular friend came out when talking to her. I imagined that she would melt away in the morning light. But, can you stay with me until morning? I wasn't sure whether there was still a sparkler bag under the shadow of the utility pole, whether those flower bouquets were real, or if there was a shadow at her feet. My memory was also becoming blurry. I didn't want to check if there was a shadow under her feet. Initially, I thought that so-called ghosts were terrifying entities that led people to death. But it turned out that there were also ghosts like her, who shared an understanding with human hearts. She nodded. She was smiling, holding the sparkler in her hand. Sure, I'll stay with you. I think today might be the anniversary of her death. She was the one who advised me not to choose today. Perhaps because it's the anniversary of her death, there were offerings like those flowers. Because it's the anniversary of her death, she told me that death is so painful. She approached me who was too close to death. Perhaps she also has some regrets. That's why she appeared to advise me to give up. It's only now that I remember I forgot to ask her name. I should have asked. On the other hand, I didn't tell her my name either. The chirping of sparrows woke up the morning. Mixed in with the sparrows' chirps were sounds that resembled seagulls. My tear-streaked face felt the light, and sunlight warmed my face. I felt something breathing, like a wet nose panting. I slowly opened my eyes, squinting against the piercing sunlight. I was lying on the concrete ground. As I looked closely, I was startled. Wow! A dog was barking loudly, and I quickly got up. I remembered the ghost had wanted to light the last sparkler and had fallen asleep unknowingly. I wiped the drool from my mouth, still half asleep. I stood up, and a lady walking her dog scolded me, saying, "Look at you, scaring people like that." The dog then calmed down and ran away with her. The kind lady approached me and said, "I'm sorry for scaring you, but sleeping here can give you a cold." "Oh? I'm sorry. I'll go back right away." "It's okay." "I see. Well, that's good." After the friendly lady and her dog left, I bathed once more in the morning sun. The sea shimmered with sunlight. I was speechless at the beauty of it. It was so incredibly beautiful. I thought I'd never see daylight again, but after a whole night, I was seeing the morning sun once more. I remembered the events of the previous night. I had survived. But amidst this beautiful and shimmering water, I couldn't open my eyes, and I didn't know if the girl I had seen last night was dead or not. The thought made my heart ache. I moved my gaze from the sea back to my feet and gasped in astonishment. There. She really is there. She didn't disappear. A girl in a white sleeveless dress was lying on the concrete ground. She didn't melt away in the morning sun. She slept in a bizarre position, but she was there. Hey! 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 I stammered in confusion. What on earth is this? I reached out and poked her arm to check. She was real noisy. "By the way, you fell asleep again." Came a voice with traces of sleepiness. She slowly sat up, still very tired, rubbing her eyes, and letting out a cartoonish yawn that you typically only see in manga. She looked at me. "Good morning." Wait, what on earth is going on? I was still shaking, staring at her face. The morning sun was shining on her face too, and her eyes were clear as crystal. Those eyes were real. "Are you not a ghost?" "I never said I was a ghost from the beginning." "Hey, but isn't it natural to think so?" A girl suddenly appears barefoot in a thin dress in front of me, someone who's so determined to die. On the concrete ground, there were spent sparklers scattered around, and the burnt-out candle stood there. It wasn't until now that I noticed the edge of the square. It was too dark last night to notice, but there were a distinctive pair of black flip-flops placed there. She stretched lazily. "Because I like going barefoot, so I took my shoes off." "What about the sparklers?" I looked to a corner near the lamppost, and the sparklers bag was still there. I couldn't see it at all in the shadows last night. She had really told me the truth. In front of my blank stare, she took out her phone from her pocket, looked at the screen, and let out a short exclamation. Then she furrowed her brow and said, "Uh-oh, all of them are missed calls from my mom. This is bad." "Mom." The slightly childish words contradicted the impression I had of her from yesterday. Her snow-white dress didn't look so clean upon closer inspection. She didn't have the eerie feeling of a ghost. Her skin wasn't as pale as it had seemed in the moonlight yesterday. She really wasn't a ghost. I can't believe I'm about to get scolded," she said as she replied to the messages in a hurry. She glanced at me and smiled. "It's interesting. You actually thought I was a ghost. After what happened last night, anyone would think that, right?" The intense desire to die that I felt yesterday had vanished in the morning sun today. She put away her smile and asked me seriously, "Why do you want to die?" Come to think of it, I didn't really state a reason last night. She didn't even listen to my reasons, just telling me to give up. It's going to be painful and accompanying me until now. They said I told the guys who the upperclassmen liked. I bit my lip. I hadn't told anyone, not even my parents. The girls knew, but I didn't know how the guys found out. Then the girls started searching for the culprit, accusing me even though I hadn't told anyone. I wasn't sure why they suspected me, but now I probably understood. It might have been because I was the worst performer in the club, often falling behind the others or making mistakes in my playing. I wanted to catch up with everyone, but it might have been due to this that the upperclassmen and the others started to dislike me and distance themselves from me. Also, During my extra practice sessions, I was taken care of by the teacher. Plus, Miss Katajiri was popular among the girls. And I practiced together with the senior she liked. They probably started to doubt me because of that. Oh? I see. She nodded. Although it was a casual response, it was like a lifeline for me. It wasn't from someone at the same school, but her nonchalant, "Oh? I see," was like a balm for my aching heart. That senior confessed after finding out her feelings were reciprocated, and it seems they started dating. Huh. So why is it bad? But maybe she can't forgive someone who broke the promise, and she uses my attitude as an excuse to blame me? Wow, that's hard to believe. What's up with that thought process? She frowned in disbelief. Her words may have been casual, but they alleviated my fears. She asked, "So you almost died for that? Why would you want to die over someone like that?" Yeah, I replied. The salty sea breeze blew by, and I felt thankful from the bottom of my heart for being able to feel the coolness it brought. "I'm glad I didn't die," I said. "Is this your first time coming to such a far place?" I remembered what she had said. "I can't believe I came all the way here by myself." Hey, she asked. "Were you really alone yesterday?" "Huh. My home is on the 4th floor of that building over there." She pointed to a nearby building, and I saw it from the window she was indicating. She continued, "Yesterday, I was on my balcony handling the sparklers. I saw you and another girl from there." "Huh. Right next to you. The two of you looked like you were watching the sea together. One of you even waved at me." I widened my eyes. My instant reflex was to look at the bouquet. The milk tea can, the plush unicorn, sparklers. Although I don't know who the other girl is, I had a feeling she was calling me over. At the same time, I needed to handle the sparklers, so I came over. "So, I was asking you if you were alone. Don't you remember? Do you remember what happened after that?" The sea was truly dazzling, and I squinted my eyes. She continued speaking. "Running away from home or attempting suicide. It was just a guess. I wouldn't have wanted you to go through with it in front of me." I looked back towards the bouquet. The bouquet of blue cornflowers and baby's breath, the unicorn plush, milk tea, and sparklers. What kind of person was she, I wonder? I asked absent-mindedly. Both of us walked towards the bouquet and stared at it. Why did she die? It seemed to be an accident, meaning it wasn't her intention to end her life. She must have wanted to keep living. So, did she save me? Perhaps it truly was the anniversary of her death. With all these offerings here, she probably didn't want to just leave me be. Even though the people around me didn't care. I closed my eyes, clasped my hands together, and whispered a thank you. I hoped the girl next to me didn't hear, but at the same time, I wished she did. "Where there's a well, there's a way," she said to me. While I was speechless with my eyes closed, she continued, "Running away from home. You're going to be scolded for sure. Even though you made everyone worry this much, as long as you return safely, everything will be fine. Don't worry. Everything will work out in the end. Are you hungry? Want to go eat at McDonald's together?" Hearing what she said, I stared at her and noticed that she had already lifted her head. She looked at me and cheerfully said, "Anyway, I'm going to get scolded when I go back, so let's go to McDonald's for breakfast." Is there a McDonald's around here? Yesterday, as I walked along the desolate road, my impression of this place was a seaside town with nothing much. As I said this, she immediately burst into laughter. "There is. Do you look down on this place? If you walk down that road, it's quite lively, you know. Come on." She grabbed my hand, and I could feel the warmth of her hands. It was real. Thank goodness she was real, not a ghost. Then, I remembered what I had asked her last night as I sat beside her. "Can you stay with me? Now I feel so embarrassed." Those words keep echoing in my ears. "Please tell me your name?" I'm Nitoga. She turned around and stretched her hand towards me. I shook her hand and replied, I'm Umi. Because I had never seen the sea at night. I'm glad I had thought that way at the time. And I'm glad I got off the train here. Wow, your name is cute. Nitoga's a cute name too. With that, we walked ahead. On the way, I glanced back at the square. The sunlight reflected on the sea shone on the square. For a brief moment, I saw the figure of a girl smiling at me and then vanishing.